that in spite of the COVID plunge, our economy is likely to bounce back and grow by approximately 7% in the year 2021.
The Ministry of Energy has failed Kenyans and must take responsibility for this unpleasant situation. They should take cognizance of the fact that it is the ordinary citizen who bears the brunt of high petroleum prices.
Kuna nchi ambazo mnaangalia Ulaya, but I can tell you this. The amount of taxes those people in Europe pay is nothing compared to what you're paying here. Nothing.
Our economy is in ICU. And I think we might stay there for a bit. Little economic growth 2023.
And as we mentioned earlier, it was an economic shocker for Kenyans on Sunday when it was announced that they will yet again have to dig deeper into their pockets to pay for fuel after the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority increased prices for the third month in a row. This steep rise in the cost of petroleum products will push the cost of transport, electricity, and manufactured goods, just to name a few. So what does this mean for an economy that was struggling pre-pandemic? Add on the COVID-19 disruption, and now this. Well, to help us understand how we got here and what the next couple of months and years might look like for your pocket, we now, joining us rather, is Bill Okero, who's the former senator and a former chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, and Dr. Jim McPhee, a distinguished lecturer at Strathmore University. Both of you, thank you for patiently waiting. Let's now get into that discussion. And Bill Okero, I want to start with you on this one. Obviously, I want to give you a chance to talk a bit about the pain at the pump, why we are seeing such a steep rise in our fuel prices, but also tell us this: because you once sat in the bicameral parliament, has it failed to shield Kenyans from these expensive costs of fuel at a time like this? What's your response?
Yeah, all right. I think first it is wrong. Let me start by saying it's misplaced to suggest that the Ministry of Energy is to blame. This is law that was signed, enacted by the government, by the parliament and by government. So it's about a formula that was enacted. Number one, when this thing came up in 2018, that there will be taxes to be introduced on petroleum, it was worked out. It came to 57.8 shillings, almost 58 shillings per litre of petrol. In 2018, KEPSA, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KOTU, all the people in the industry complained that this was going to affect, the cost of living, it's going to affect productivity, it's going to affect competitive everything. But let me tell you, not a single political leader. It was just immediately after the handshake. In fact, the official opposition party was among those who really supported it in parliament, that those taxes be passed. And let me also say what McPhee, my colleague, had mentioned earlier. When the international prices of oil went to zero per barrel in April 2020, the price of petrol, at the pump price of petrol in Kenya remained at 93 shillings. It never went down below 93. Why? Because even at 93, 58 shillings was still the amount that was going to government. So you see, the fact is that whatever we do, petroleum accounts for 15% of the total revenue that the government of Kenya collects. It's the cash cow. It's actually the only major source of revenue. We are no different than those guys in the Arab countries who make money from petroleum. We make most of our revenue from petroleum. So the government has to do this. Lastly, I want to comment, and then I'll come to the issue that you raised. I think the point that has been raised also that disturbs a lot of Kenyans is the comment by the government spokesman, which I believe is shared by his bosses. You see, the fact is that in those developed economies, government spends money on its citizens. Those who are unemployed get benefits. The vaccines that we're asking for, the government was asking for 10 billion loan from World Bank the other day to get vaccines, to vaccinate about 1/3 of Kenyans. In those countries, the government offers vaccines to the entire population at their cost. They don't go asking for loans. I mean, so really, instead, we asked for 10 billion loan, but we spent 5 billion on car grants for MCAs. At the same time, so it's about misplacement, misplaced priorities. And I want to say this, and this I want to quote what the former Prime Minister of Britain said, Margaret Thatcher at the time. that, you know, there's no country that has prospered by taxing their people to death. It can't. You have to leave money in the pockets of the people so that they can make investment, they can make their choices, they can make a living. You have to talk about this living of the living standards of people. So on your question, Parliament, yes, Parliament is implicit in this action. This is why Kenyans are saying it's crocodile tears. I think when this bill came in 2018, Parliament went ahead and approved it, and I think Parliament had responsibility. Today, as we speak, you saw that, but in the newspapers, that there's going to be a supplementary budget on Thursday. It has never happened that a supplementary budget, you'll have a special sitting, MPs will be recalled. On one afternoon, they are going to look at the budget, first reading, second reading, third reading, and pass a budget of over 100 billion supplementary. You know, in one city, it has never happened. It means they are simply looking at their interest. What happened is, Treasury sat with them last week and told them, you are going to get the 10 billion areas for CDF. Are you going to pass our budget? That was the deal. It was all in the public media, and you saw it. So unfortunately, Parliament has let down Kenyans, and I think the leaders who are really speaking about taking leadership of this country should know that it's their actions that is responsible for this, because you're asking government to expand its services. You're expanding government today in BBI, you know, expanding it by every means possible, creating state corporations. Today, I think I posted an advert by Nuclear Energy Board. You know, it's really shocking. Nuclear Energy Board that has not put up any nuclear facility has a huge billboard in the city, you know, spending hundreds of thousands, probably millions on that advert, telling them nuclear energy is the future. Why would you want to waste money?
Okay.
So there's a lot of wastage in government. And what Oguna doesn't tell you is that the Kenyans don't want to pay more taxes because that is where our money is going to go.
Okay.
There's no other money. There's no loan. And everything that people spend is taxpayers' money.
And I want to let our viewers know we did reach out to Treasury today and to the relevant committees in the National Assembly to join us for this discussion, but their representatives were not available. And Senator, you've raised some interesting points there. I'll come back and interrogate them a bit more, but let me also allow Dr. McPhee to weigh in. And Dr. McPhee, I want to begin by reading a tweet off the back of something that you said. I hope you can still hear me. Muthoni Mwangi is saying, Dr. Jim McPhee's point, looking at the competitiveness of the nation compared to our neighbors is crucial. We need to look at factors that affect our national competitiveness as it impacts our position in the global market. Dr. McPhee, a bit earlier on, you were talking about the cost of fuel in Kenya vis-a-vis our East African neighbors, and I cut you off before you could finish. Why does this happen? Why that disparity, and how does that affect our regional competitiveness?
Our regional competitiveness. Well, it's precisely because of what Senator was saying a moment ago.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to... sorry, I'm just trying to mute my TV actually here.
Okay. Let me give you a minute to do that as I continue on with...
Okay.
Have you gotten that sorted? Okay, no, it sounds like you're still trying to sort that out. Senator Kero, so then let me ask you this. So what does this then, and when you hear Musalia Mudavadi, for example, saying it's unacceptable for petrol to retail at 122.81 when the landing cost is 49.84, asking the Energy Ministry to revise the formula used in pricing fuel, and you said you disagree with that. Why? And talk to us about that formula, the formula that led to what was announced on Sunday.
No, I think Honorable Mudavadi is backing up the wrong horse. Clearly, this thing is about an act of parliament. When we introduced the price control in petroleum, the formula was factored in law, and so, you know, the Energy Ministry has little room to maneuver. It just has to apply the formula as provided for in the statute, and the key, you know, variable, the constant in this thing is the taxes that you have shown on the screen, and so unless you amend the law and reduce the taxes that, you know, the government tax. There isn't much else. You can play around with other figures in terms of whatever, but I think the most important thing, and I think McPhee explained, is that when the international prices go up, then that is what gets factored into the formula. The rest of the things which you can change probably is the margin that goes to the dealers, or and or the taxes. There's not much else you can really, maneuver. And I think for me, the critical thing is that if the government is really concerned about the plight of the citizens, they need to understand that taxing, is not a solution. And so, in my view, it's time the government should not liberalize, but it's time it's reviewed that formula in terms of the level of taxes, that is implicit in the formula and is provided for in the statute.
Okay, and I'll be coming back to you to understand what you feel the government has in terms of options. Is this the only way to raise money to keep the government moving, to keep the nation moving without, of course, hurting the pockets of citizens any further? Dr. McPhee, do we now have a good connection with you? I can allow you to weigh in on our national competitiveness and why.
I'm back now, so
go ahead.
I think it's very, very important we listen to what the senator is saying, because what he's saying is absolutely, absolutely spot on. But you see, as President Uhuru Kenyatta himself has admitted, 2 billion shillings per day is stolen in Kenya. That is 800 billion shillings a year. Now, if this is the case, why are we totally unable to stop it? Why? We've got to ask ourselves, can we fix anything? There's an article in the paper yesterday about, or is it today, about Mr. Munya, our Minister, our CS for Agriculture, and he's talking about reviving pyrethrum. In the 1980s, Kenya was the world's producer of pyrethrum. We produced 70% of the pyrethrum produced in the world. The government took it over. Those individuals, we blame the government, but don't forget, at the end of the day, it is individuals. Our electricity, for example, is one of the costliest in Africa. And yet, the man who is guilty of having stolen maybe billions of shillings from Kenya Power and Lighting is a free man. He will not be extradited to Jersey, where those billions are actually situated. Now, why can't we make Kenya work? Kenya works. I tell people, I tell my students, Kenya works if you and I make it work. Do we identify problems properly? Can we then put a remedy to those problems? Or are we just incapable of doing this? We talk and we talk again, and we pass new laws, and the judges rule the country. We even have an extra election because of the judges, and we're not thinking about the future of Kenya.
Let me ask you,
are your children going to get jobs? I was talking to a past student this morning. She has 2 brothers-in-law living with her. One has been unemployed for 8 years. The other one is an internal auditor. He lost his job because he's an honest man. Now, this is, a little bit earlier we were listening to Robin Njogu. Well, not listening to him because he's passed on. But what were his final words? We're winning this one. Where is Robin Njogu today? He's a dead man. And we in Kenya are saying we're winning this one. Kenya may be dead in a short while, because we cannot compete with our neighbors.
And that's why I want to interrupt you there, Dr. McPhee. Hang on.
For it.
Hang on.
In Uganda,
can you hear me, Dr. McPhee?
You can buy Tusker, made in Kenya. You can buy maize meal and sugar cheaper in Uganda than in Kenya. So explain the economics of that to me.
And that's what I want to...
We have an economy which is upside down. And the only people, as someone has pointed out, the only people who are really benefiting from this are the billionaires. So,
Dr. McPhee, I need to interrupt you. Can you hear me, Dr. McPhee?
The people in power are not ready to change. And if they're not ready to change, wananchi watukufu, pole. you are going to really suffer in the future. My best
I might have to interrupt you, Dr. McPhee, now. Let me allow Senator Kero to get a voice in. This is a discussion that we are going to have, and so for some reason I can't quite communicate with him. Let's try and get that sorted. Senator Kero, let me come back to you. So one then asks this, and corruption is a major factor. I think no one denies that. But we also know that there is corruption in our East African neighbors. So it's not corruption alone. You know, corruption it's a global phenomenon, right? So I think for me, the point that he raised about our competitiveness then makes me wonder, are there policy decisions that have not been properly formulated to make it maybe, to increase the production costs in Kenya? What else contributes to the higher production costs in Kenya as compared to our East African neighbors?
Yes, I think a very good example, I'll give you two very good examples. For a very long time, we have been talking about the high cost of production, largely because of two things, the cost of energy and the cost of transportation. And so when SGR was mooted, the thinking was that, well, for the first time, yes, if we have that railway, probably the cost of freight, the cost of transportation is going to go down significantly, because it was one of our biggest issues that was making it, our production uncompetitive. Second was the energy. We were told that once we get all those geothermal, energy wells completed, and we have enough and surplus energy, the cost of energy was going to go down. We are going to put in the windmills in Marsabit and all those things. But let me tell you, from 2013, when this administration came in and gave those pledges, today energy costs are far much higher than they were in that 2013. In spite of the fact that we have completed several more wells of geothermal production in Naivasha. We have got some of the cheapest energy, but still, because we have those thermal power generators, which are there because of other expediencies, not because of they're required, still our energy remains the most expensive, because KP's, Kenya Power and Lighting, has other vested interests. We'll make sure that the cost of energy is always high, and everyone knows that in this country. So the SGR, of course, misplaced. It has become the most expensive. People still prefer to use the trucks. So we still are back to where we are. We are not competitive, and it's policy decision. These are all about policy decisions. Number two, it's about management. Some of these things is about misplaced priorities. We are not putting money in the right places. And I've given examples earlier about when I talked about the nuclear. Just go through our budget and see how money is spent on areas where it's not a priority. It's wasted. This is why you find that in agriculture, for example, in the food security, we are not able to go anywhere, in spite of the fact that we always talk about it. What happened to Kulalu? We spent billions and didn't take off. But the reality is that when we import fertilizers for the farmers, it's always more expensive than it is than the one that is brought in by the retail farmers. Yet this is from the government. So I think the challenge we have is not just the corruption, but mismanagement, poor governance. I think I would put all these things at poor governance. It's about leadership, really. The buck stops in the leadership. This is why when you compare us to Rwanda or some of these other countries, really, that have made strides in the last few years, we think you're comparing wrong. Those are wrong comparisons, because it's about the leadership. It's about the vision they have for their country. It's about the management. And so this is why in Kenya, lastly, I want to say, one of the other challenges, I think, in addition to that, which has made things very competitive, is the amount of money that we have borrowed, the public debt. Because this thing is factored into every, it has become a key factor of production. Why? Because these loans are going to be paid by us. How? Through the taxes. So it goes and it ends up in more taxes and more taxes and more taxes, which makes us less competitive. And I think McPhee gave examples. If things are expensive, petroleum goes up, our things will become more expensive. Today already you've seen many companies are adjusting their prices, their cost of manufacturing will go up, their cost of production will go up. Those farmers now, their maize will be more expensive because they have to buy diesel, they have to buy fuel for their tractors and for their implements and so forth. So I think the public debt contributes also significantly. And I think that is the elephant in the room in this country when you talk about the economy. It's not about taxes. It's not about KRA. It's not about revenue. The revenue side is not the issue. It's about the spending. The lack of rationalization in public service, which is responsible for the huge public loans. And we think loans are, it's just something we just collect. This is taxpayers' money. We are the ones who are going to pay. And we pay through this uncompetitiveness and through this difficult cost and high cost of living.
Okay. Let me look at some feedback. We're getting a lot of messages, and a lot of Kenyans are asking, what is the solution? What is the way forward? And so, Dr. McPhee and Bilokero, I want you to think about that as I read these tweets. This is what Kenyans are saying. Kipleting Manuela says, government should reverse decision on increased fuel prices. Majority of Kenyans don't have money in their pockets. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Jeff says, recent World Bank analysis shows that taxes on petroleum products are a critical source of government revenue for low-income countries. And if the experience of industrial countries serves as any guide, the rates of these taxes will have to rise sharply as low-income economies develop. But policy makers must be mindful of how taxes and subsidies affect relative prices of fuels, since a very large difference between products can lead to fuel switching and adulteration, adversely affecting the government's tax take and pollution levels. So high fuel costs could spark off some of those things he's mentioned. Enoch Kilile says, whilst taxation is one of the key sources of many governments' revenue, effective, efficient and transparent use of taxes is very critical in bestowing confidentiality or confidence of the citizens thereof. Let's look at some other tweets. Remember, the hashtag is Newsnight. SMS line 22422. Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok says fuel price increment will worsen the situation for investors who are currently battling high power tariffs. Post-COVID recovery may not be realized with massive loss of jobs, unattainable rents, and high standard of living. Okay, I think we have another one. Dan Songok says, Wanjiko should not be burdened with enormous taxes in the name of building the nation. Government should take care of its citizens first, then enjoy the fruits later. Okay, let's take a look at, let me get some reactions from my guest rather. And Dr. McPhee, I trust you can hear me now. I don't think you could hear me earlier. We are in the budget cycle, and from where you sit, if we were to talk about a pro-recovery budget, one that Kenya needs, what should be included in that budget, Dr. McPhee?
You know, it's very difficult to say, because you know, the biggest line item that we have in our budget is interest on debt. Now, that interest on debt, it's the biggest item, as I say, and it cannot be reduced in any way at all. The second biggest is the amount of money that goes to the counties. And, you know, we are getting promised in the BBI that that amount of money will be increased to 35% of our total budget. I don't know why is so much of the world, you know, it's the same with Biden in the United States. So much of these things are basically lies. And is it possible for politicians anywhere in the world to tell the truth? You know, but anyway, the third item in our budget is expenditure on teachers, our free education. The TSC, you know, takes up an enormous amount of money every year. But as the senator was mentioning, there are many, many things where, you know, we don't need to spend money and we're spending money. It's incredible to me how I'm meant to be a responsible citizen, and the moment I get into power, I will drive a huge car with outriders and sirens going and getting through the traffic, which is really impeding everyone else. But, you know, I don't act with responsibility. So we've got to really go through that budget line by line and cut out all the wasteful expenditure. Thank God we've got COVID, which actually is preventing people from traveling around the world. But it's also, you know, we know that 166 billion shillings didn't come into our economy last year because travel was cut out. We didn't get our tourists. So we have to understand, we've got to cut back government expenditure. But do we see this? The answer is no. We see members of government spending as if, there is no limit on the amount of money that they have. We need responsibility. We need to cut back our expenditure, not increase it, as is presented in the budget at the moment. We've got to cut it back. And if we don't do this, we are being reckless. We are not thinking about the people of this country. We have to be more responsible in government. Our parliament, do you care about Kenya? Our governors, our senators, do you care about Kenya, or do you only think of yourself? Because it would seem that they think only of themselves.
How quickly, if this formula that you're proposing, Dr. McPhee, if it's something that would happen, what do you see in terms of, and I mean, it's a phrase we can't quite say, but post-COVID recovery? One of the analysts that we spoke with yesterday said the earliest we could see some sort of recovery in our economy, proper recovery, would be in 2023 because there's an election coming up next year. So for you, what are your predictions if some of the measures that you and Bilokero and others are proposing are to be implemented? When and how quickly could we see better days for Kenyans?
Well, if we actually take what has happened in the recent by-elections, we discover that, the problems that we've had every election year are going to be repeated in 2022. So, it's amazing that somehow we never actually face the truth. There was an article in the Sunday Nation, we're living in a land of liars, so try to tell the truth. But we have to tell ourselves the truth. Mm-hmm. This year is going to be another bad year. Let's face it, we've got this third wave. It's not going to be out of the way with vaccination because, well, the experience of vaccination around the world is that it doesn't work like, I know I got a polio vaccination a number of years ago, and I thank God I did get it because I've never suffered from polio. But the fact is, we don't know how efficacious, how effective this particular vaccine is going to be. And a lot of people, 1/3 of the US military have refused to be vaccinated. So when Kenyans refuse to be vaccinated, well, they're doing exactly what 1/3 of the US military is doing, because they fear, this thing here could have some kind of an effect on them. Mm-hmm. So, this year, talking about growth of 7% is pie in the sky. This is not possible. And then we go into the election next year. Already we have the campaigns on. We already have violence in our by-elections. These are not good signs for next year. Okay. Would you go and visit a war zone in Syria? Would you go and visit, let's say, Iraq, where you have fighting going on? The answer is no.
And we hope we will not get anywhere near those countries that you've mentioned. Mm-hmm.
And people are not going to be investing in the same way. So recovery in 2023, I agree with that 100%.
Okay. Senator Kero, let me allow you to come in. And Senator, we've gotten a text here from a viewer saying, listening to your economists and very great minds at that, it sounds hopeless. Give us some hope, Senator Kero. What is the way out of this? What are the options? First of all, government, are there more options, and what is simply on the table?
Government, yes, the government has options. And really, one of the things which I always say is that that's what a leader is. A leader, as Napoleon said, is a dealer in hope. The government can give hopes to people because they have the options. One of the things they can do, for example, which I think many Kenyans have talked about, is they should not have removed those tax reliefs that they removed in January. Given that we are facing still a lot of challenges, the COVID is with us, thousands of businesses are still locked down, millions are out of jobs, life is difficult. One of the ways you can enhance the recovery of the economy is to have more tax reliefs, today, not try to remove them. In fact, introduce more tax relief, not just on pay as you earn, not on corporation tax only, but even on VAT, on whatever way you can, because you can do that by cutting down on public expenditure. You don't need to, in a time when there is a crisis, these are extraordinary times, you don't need to invest in those legacy projects, for heaven's sake. You can defer those things, allow people to have money and have a living and stay, So one of the things I would suggest is the tax relief. Number two, stop borrowing. Because the consequences of what we are seeing today, the high tax, for example, this tax on petroleum in 2018 was introduced because it was a directive. It was a requirement by IMF when the government took that ECF facility. And today, last week, Parliament and IMF agreed that there are going to be more measures that will be introduced by IMF. In fact, let me tell you, the situation is likely to get worse if IMF puts its foot down, because they need more taxes to be raised. They need more because the government needs 1 trillion to service loans annually starting from this financial year. So one of the things which I say would be hoped is that the government has the chance, they need to listen. Because if you don't listen to people, if you don't listen to your citizens, if you don't listen to your country, you can't rule. Listen to the Kenyans, please provide the tax reliefs. It's one way of really enhancing demand, because when people have money in their pockets, it creates demand. Factories will go back to work, businesses will run, because people have money to buy things.
Senator.
Because this is not the time really to introduce taxes. In this kind of situation, governments do not introduce taxes. So I think one of the things I would suggest is yes. Number two, I think, is the loans that I've mentioned, that they need to stop borrowing completely. Really, that is the thing that is going to kill this country, and it's already doing.
Senator.
Number three, I think, is rationalization. Lastly, I want to say rationalization of public service is a thing that we have talked about from 2003 up to today. But the inverse, the opposite is what is happening. Every year we are expanding, creating new ministries, creating new departments, new state corporations. Every little activity, you create an authority. You create I think we need to rationalize public expenditure. We are living large in government. This is the only country in Africa where you go to a government office and you really think it's a private sector office. The way those offices are furnished, the way those offices are served with the service, the consumption, it's crazy. So we need to really cut down. And I've mentioned, for example, the advertisements. You open the media, you look at the consultancies that are being done by every government outfit, is spending billions on trying to do this or that. At this time of crisis, there are government officers that are building offices of all manner of projects, and this is not the time to really go. You have counties where people are
let me ask you this, Senator.
And you're spending money on other things.
And you have made your point on that. Let me ask you this. We had you on the show, on this same show, about a year ago. COVID had just hit, and we were very concerned. The whole country was concerned about the economy and what it would mean. And what has happened between the last time we hosted you and now is that, according to some numbers we have, about 1.7 million jobs because of the lockdown were lost. And it depends on who you're looking at. Kenya National Bureau of Statistics have their numbers, World Bank have their numbers, and so forth. But what we know is that lots of jobs were lost over the last 1 year because of some of the lockdown measures. And the president acknowledged this when he spoke. How do we get either those jobs back, or how do we create new jobs? Because all the measures you're talking about are well and good, but many Kenyans tonight are asking, where are we going to get work from? What solutions do you have? What sectors can produce jobs at a time like this?
Let me tell you, Maura, the jobs are lost in the sectors that have been mentioned by McPhee. For example, take the hospitality sector. The hotel industry, the tourism industry, it's all shut down. That sector alone was creating millions of jobs for Kenyans. There are still many sectors that have been affected. When you have in curfew, when you have reduced demands, there are no jobs, people are not able to buy. I'm in manufacturing myself. Let me tell you, in the last 3 months, production has really gone down by more than half, and it's not only our hours, but in the entire industry that I'm in. And so one of the ways in which you can create jobs is what I mentioned in the first time: provide tax reliefs to businesses. The reason why I keep repeating this is that when you provide tax reliefs, it gives an opportunity for businesses to invest that relief. That money, that saving is invested. You create more jobs. You hire more people. So there isn't much room in terms of opening the COVID rules of the curfews and so forth. But I think what you need to do is provide that opportunity. Number two is the stimulus package that they provided last time, 57 billion. fine, it was a gesture in the right way because it creates demand. It puts money in pockets of people and it creates demand. You know, the thing about employment is created by businesses, not government. And businesses employ people when they have demand, when their businesses, when there's productivity. And that can be done, you know, realized when people have money and they're able to order goods. So I think one of the things they have said is that please provide tax reliefs. You're going to help in recovery and you're going to help in creating. Number two, there are specific measures that the government can introduce to businesses to encourage employment. You can, for example, and this happens in other countries, provide some tax incentives on pay as you earn that will encourage people to take up more employees, you know, or tax incentives that can encourage companies to employ more people. You know, if you hire 5 people, you're going to get this tax, tax waiver or tax reduction or tax whatever. These things can be done if the government stops thinking about raising taxes. But in the situation where we are because of the debt and the IMF rules and so forth, it's becoming a bit of a tight situation, but I think the government really needs to do that, and that is the way to create jobs, in my view.
And I want Dr. McPhee to weigh in on the same. How do we create these jobs, Dr. McPhee? How do we create employment? I would dare say we've already had many politicians talking about them wanting to vie to be president in next year's general election. For anyone who would want to take over next year, what should they be thinking about in terms of job creation? Because that really is the cry of many Kenyans tonight.
Well, I think one of the things that has to happen is that, I think one of the things that we got to do is we got to look at reality. People say, well, you're being very, very negative, but I'm an accountant. I actually look at numbers because numbers tell you things. And, for example, one of the great things that has happened this last year is now we actually export more avocado than South Africa. We are the 8th largest producer of avocado in the world. So I would say one of our things that we've really got to do, and I've got some past students, one was working in a bank. She then retained a job because she's a very clever woman, but she realized that working up until 10 o'clock every night was not, in fact, going to be something that she wanted to do. So she went back and started producing agricultural products not only in Sagana, but also in Nyeri, and she now is exporting to the European Union. Things are difficult there but our exports of horticulture and our exports of tea and coffee, the coffee price is very, very good at the moment. It doesn't, the unfortunate thing is you can't get into coffee today, but you can start growing avocado, you can start growing macadamia. Macadamia is really low at the moment because of, the whole thing of tourism. A lot of nuts are actually consumed by the airlines and also by the hotels. And so the macadamia market is not good at the moment, but we hope that that's going to get back. The tea price is very low. The international tea price is very low. The KTDA are actually paying 5 shillings more. They're paying 21 shillings per kilo of plucked tea. And that means that, the tea farmers are actually going to have more money in their pocket. But, some of the sweeping laws that we're passing in Kenya today are really making a life almost impossible in Kenya. Drones, for example. There is a new law passed on drones. If you want to have a drone, you want to use it, let's suppose you want to put it up in the air to photograph something, you've got to pay a license of 20,000 shillings. Now, do people in government understand the value of money? They talk about billions of shillings as if, it's the amount of money that you give as a tip in a hotel. This is the amount of money that they're talking about. They are not business people. They need to learn about business. They don't know how to run business. And the result is that we have decisions made by people who are totally ignorant. I may have a first-class degree in economics from the London School of Economics, but I'm not Kwame Owino, who is a real economist. I'm not a David Ndii. So we got to understand, you people in Parliament, listen to the business community. The manufacturing community in this country pays 17% of the taxes. Agriculture, we say we need to give money to agriculture. Agriculture is a business. It pays 1% of the taxes in Kenya. So, you know, we've got to try NCBB. It's going to collapse under a debt of 7.3 billion shillings. Any government thing, KPCU, Mr. Munya has put KPCU back in existence at probably the cost of the farmer. And you know, we're doing this again and again.
So,
and
so
again.
let me ask you this.
Pyrethrum. We almost destroyed coffee. We're now back to trying to destroy tea, which is our most important export.
Dr. McPhee,
The law
Dr. McPhee.
is nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. But you know, Parliament, you just give them a little bit of money, they're bribed. This happens all over the world. Lobbying is what happens in the United States. We call it corruption. But politicians,
Dr. McPhee, if you can
think about Kenya.
Okay. Thank you. So even as we wrap this up, I want to give you each about a minute. Let me start with you, Dr. McPhee, if you can still hear me. What's your word of advice then to Treasury? I'm sure they're watching at this time. I'm sure they're listening. What's your word to them at a time when Kenyans are reeling from this economic shocker, the hiked fuel prices? What's your short word to them, please?
Look at every line in your budget item. Every line. Cut out travel, cut out expenditure. Listen to what the senator has said this evening and put into practice what he has suggested.
Okay.
We have to reduce government expenditure. And the only way we can do it is by looking at every line and reducing that line, especially nonsensical politicking around the country.
Senator, you've been referenced there. I can give you the last word then. What's your advice to Treasury at this time? I know they've got heavy decisions to make.
Treasury, my advice to Treasury, the 7% growth that they project is going to be hot air. Look at it this way. The dollar is going to appreciate because of the change in and the optimism in the U.S. in the change in government and so forth. The petroleum prices are going up. It's an external shock that is going to make the matters worse. COVID is going to be with us, as you've had for probably this year and even next year. So those projections are not going to be realized. So the situation is going to be a bit bad. So in my view, put the money where your mouth is. This is a subsistence economy. 80% of our people survive on the informal sector. So don't give a token support to that sector. That is where you need to put money in. It's not about how much you generate from them. For example, when you give 10 billion to the entire SME, that accounts for 80% of the employment and informal sector, and that is where we are. And you give 10 billion to bail out an airline, then you really have misplaced priorities. And I think, so what I want to urge the government is that, given the challenges that we expect, please put money into where the Kenyans are, where 80% of the Kenyans are. Let them at least be able to have something, to do. And number two, please provide tax reliefs as much as possible. It's not about spending. It's about supporting the people at this time when they're in need so that they can have money to put bread or to put ugali on the table.
Thank you so much. And of course, this discussion gives a lot of food for thought for those who will be attending that special sitting of Parliament, members of the National Assembly this coming Thursday. Remember, there's a special sitting to discuss the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And in the notice, the public has also been invited. Hopefully, some of the thoughts of my two guests here tonight will be factored into that particular discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Jim McPhee, who's a lecturer, senior lecturer, Strathmore University, also the director there, College of Accountancy. Thank you so much for your time this evening. And Bill Okero, former senator and former chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, sharing their thoughts on the state of the nation, and specifically the state of the economy. What are your thoughts? Use the hashtag Newsnight, SMS line 22422. We can continue to engage online, but unfortunately, our time is up. On behalf of the whole team that's made this broadcast possible, thank you so much for having tuned in. This is News Night. We do this every Tuesday, discussing topics that are important to you, whichever part of the country or the world you're watching us from. A sign language interpreter has been Wilson Mushora. Have a good night. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. Stay safe, wear a mask, try and keep yourself and your loved ones as safe as possible. COVID is real. Stay safe and have a good night, and we'll see you soon.